today we are on which page? Aha. We're on page 120. Great. I'm glad my own co-hosts are reminding me where we've got to. And we're recording now, so we're about to begin the session. So as usual, we're reading from this wonderful book, Social and Communal Harmony, which is the overriding theme of the suttas that are here. And today it's very nice. We move from the 7, conditions for social harmony and the 7 conditions for monastic harmony to attending on the sick, which is very interesting and I think highlights the importance of compassion. And also, to some extent, the Buddha's immense wisdom and the way that his teachings would be transferable to every aspect of life, right? Not only to looking after one another in the society at large or in the monasteries, but also to the importance he placed on looking after people when they're sick as well. And it's quite beautiful here to notice how much detail he goes into around not only the qualities of a good patient, but the qualities of a good attendant. Foremost, and how to be a good patient to make it easier for others to care for you. So, and of course, this links in partly to the wisdom that we develop through our practice of meditation. So I shall begin. And for anybody who hasn't been to these sutta classes before, I'm not sure about Bia if you've been. Are you new, Bia, to this sutta class? Anyway, for the benefit of those who are, actually there's one in the room, our very dear friend Richard. This is more of a discussion than me giving all the answers, which I don't have. So do please ask questions or feel free to give your understanding or application of this, how it might apply to your lives, any insights you have. As we go through. So you can do that by either raising your virtual hand, or I will also prompt questions at certain places along the way. And it's really nice when we can hear from other people so that we get a perspective on how broad and how applicable these teachings are to everybody's life. So here we go. It's this is from the Anguttara 5s, number 1, 2, 3. So that's easy to remember. And it's called Attending on the Sick. And as usual, I'm going to change the language to be gender inclusive. So here I'll say monastics, but of course this is applicable to anybody, whether monastic or lay. Monastics possessing 5 qualities, an attendant is qualified to take care of a patient. What 5? Number 1. One is able to prepare medicine. Number 2, one knows what is beneficial and harmful, so that one withholds what is harmful and offers what is beneficial. Number 3, one takes care of the patient with a mind of loving kindness, not for the sake of material rewards. Number 4, one is not disgusted at having to remove feces, urine, vomit, or spittle. And number 5, one is able from time to time to instruct, encourage, inspire, and gladden the patient with a Dhamma talk. Possessing these 5 qualities, an attendant is qualified to take care of a patient. I don't know if any of you here are carers, maybe in your professional work, or perhaps for someone at home, or a friend, a parent, even a child, but perhaps you can relate to some of this. Perhaps you've not thought about the inspiration or rousing a person with a Dhamma talk, but who knows, sometimes when we're sick, that's when we really need to dig a bit deeper, isn't it? And to find new ways of being able to relate to the sickness and actually glean some wisdom from that experience. So I'll carry on, but we can go into this in detail. And this is reciprocal, so how the patient can then be easy to take care of. So possessing 5 other qualities, a patient is easy to take care of. What 5? One does what is beneficial. One observes moderation in what is beneficial. One takes their medicine. One accurately discloses one's symptoms to their kind-hearted attendant. They report, as fits the case, that their condition is getting worse, or getting better, or remaining the same. And one can patiently endure arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, harrowing, disagreeable, and sapping one's vitality. Possessing these 5 qualities, a patient is easy to take care of. So I find this very interesting, and I don't know about other people, but yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that we're also talking here about how the patient can be easy to take care of, and in that way support the attendant. And it's interesting because at the moment I'm thinking of going to India for some Ayurvedic treatment. And if I go there, I go to this very traditional hospital where they ask you to actually stay put in a place for about 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how long they decide you need to recover, and for them to do the treatment and actually get the most benefit from the treatment. And one of the things I ask actually is, of course, that you take your medicine, and also that you kind of stay inside. You don't go around and sort of go walking in the town and even do internet too much, but you actually take it as an opportunity to have a lot of rest and recuperation and just focus on the healing process. And you can see how that would be very helpful to those attending, right? Especially if they're attending on a person with a mind of loving kindness, you know, trying to do their best for you and offer you the right medicines. But then if you don't take the medicine, their efforts become kind of futile. And I think it's quite interesting here from, again, an Ayurvedic perspective, because I studied Indian medicine at degree level before I became a Bhikkhuni, or before I took Bhikkhuni ordination. And it's interesting to me that it says one observes moderation in what is beneficial. Because sometimes we think we have to be moderate with those things that are not so beneficial, but if it's beneficial, we can have as much as we want, right? Even if it's something so-called healthy. But actually in Indian medicine, anything that's taken in excess or even taken too little of is considered not so healthy, you know, quite detrimental sometimes. So there's always that idea of moderation in everything, even that's beneficial. Yeah, and accurately disclosing symptoms to the kind-hearted attendant and being honest, as fits the case, that the condition's getting worse or better or remaining the same, so that they can apply the appropriate remedy. And I kind of like the last one, because I think that this is very important in meditation practice, that we learn to endure those bodily feelings that are difficult, that are uncomfortable, unpleasant. And in some translations, it actually says menacing to life. So of course, these are the kind of sensations, feelings in the body that we're all going to experience at some point. And at that time, you know, we need to have had some practice. So sometimes, you know, we can take the path a little bit too easy, especially when we're practicing samadhi. I know some teachers who encourage you to kind of always be comfortable no matter what. And if you're not comfortable, don't even bother trying to meditate, because it will be really hard to meditate and get into deep samadhi. But I think something's really missing there, because unless we actually learn to be able to develop the wise attitude, an attitude of kindness and compassion, patience with these difficult feelings, then how are we going to endure, you know, old age, disease, and the dying process? It's going to be really very difficult. So if we need perfect conditions to get enlightened, I mean, basically we need to be in the Deva realm, you know, but the human realm has kind of a fair share of both suffering and happiness. And I think for that reason, the Buddha said it was one of the most beneficial places to actually practice, where there's the most chance of really making progress on the path. So without trying to, you know, bring about difficult feelings in the body by sitting on your knees when the nuns are giving the blessing chant, you know, if you can find comfort, great, go ahead. But if you're stuck, if your back's against the wall, it's important to know how to be able to handle those feelings and really handle the mind that reacts, isn't it? because sometimes we can't alleviate the physical pain. So it's very interesting that it talks about the ideal patient. Yeah. So anyway, I didn't say too much about the first part, but I'd really like to open to comments and input from the group, because I guess this is quite instructive for all of us. And I don't know if anybody here has had experience looking after people who are sick, or I guess most people will have to some extent. If you would like to share anything or how this might relate. So I think Susie has her hand up. If you do find your virtual hand down below on the buttons, it's even more helpful for our co-hosts. So we can, there we go.
So Susie, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
So what came to mind wasn't just humans, it was like animals as well. Because I had personal experience looking after animals, and I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm not being offensive. Oh, goodness. Animals are also like beings we look after as well. Like, of course, because like veterinary care, and I was going to go into veterinary care actually when I left college. So one of the first things that came to mind was like cleaning up after them and administering medicine. But what like also related to it was like having difficulty like giving the medicine to them, because I worked at a kennel once, and I tried to give this medicine to a dog with a slice of ham, and it wouldn't eat the medicine, it would eat the ham, only the ham.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I wanted to add. Some patients can be difficult.
So yes, some patients can be difficult, absolutely, yes. And I think that's why here it says that one takes care of the patient with a mind of loving kindness, not for the sake of material rewards. And at first when I read that, I thought, okay, so that's not for money, that's not for getting rich, you know, because then there's a lot of corruption that can come into the kind of healthcare industry. But maybe one of the rewards that we might be seeking is that the patient gets better, you know? And sometimes that's an actual corruption of loving kindness. We give loving kindness in order that someone else feels better. But the Buddha actually teaches that we give loving kindness to purify our mind of aversion and to develop that beautiful quality of unconditional love, which means you love that being, whether a human or an animal, whether or not they get better, whether or not they respond, even whether or not they take their medicine, I think. So it involves patience, and I think patience is a really important aspect of true loving kindness. You know, the Buddha says that loving kindness is like a mother who protects with her life her only child. Only, it says to all living beings, not only one's own child. And that's the difference between a mother's love and real loving kindness. It's not only to their child, but it's as to their child to all beings. So that patience is immense. You know, because we don't like all beings. All beings aren't going to behave the way we want them to. And one of our dear supporters who's sitting here now actually told this very beautiful story about patience when looking after others. And he's working in a respite center where people come in with all kinds of physical and mental disabilities, so to speak, or what can we say, mental, not the norm. I don't want to say illnesses really, but you know, people who are struggling and who need some care, some respite away from either their usual place where they live or maybe usual facility where they live. And he said that sometimes it's really taught him patience, because sometimes he has to sit with a patient for a whole hour before they will eat a spoon of food. And they have to continue to look after this person and be with them and encourage them and develop that loving kindness until they finish the meal. Imagine that, you know, if you had to wait a whole hour, maybe for the dog to eat the medicine and not only the ham, you know, or maybe several days, I don't know. But you can see it as a practice in patience. So yeah, it's not always going to work, but we can still purify our minds, I guess. Yeah. Thanks for that. It's really nice to hear that applied to animals. I don't know about the instructing and gladdening one with a Dhamma talk. That might not refer to animals, but who knows what animals can understand. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Did you, Richard, have his hand up at some point? Did you? Yeah.
Yeah, Richard. Oh. Is he now?
I nearly sneezed. Richard, are you there? We can't hear you, Richard.
Richard, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, okay. Hi, sorry about that. Yes, I mean, myself, I actually, I've got two friends of mine. There's a friend of mine called Redwood. He's currently in a care home up in North London. I've known him for about 20 years. And in the past, he was very helpful to me because I was homeless. And I've known this guy for about 20 years. So, I've been helping him out because he's in a care home at the moment. But he's a sort of manic depressive schizophrenic. And he's very, very lonely. And he, he finds it very hard to cope with his emotional states. So because I'm his friend, I go to visit him with another friend of mine. We just simply go there, just simply to be with him only for about an hour. And we just sit there and we just read to him. At the moment reading a book to him, and just simply do that. Just simply be in a room with him for an hour with the right intention. It's really nice. And I have another friend of mine as well, this lady who's also, she's also in a at the moment she's in a mental hospital. She's had another breakdown. She has a sort of condition, recurring condition caused by medication to sort of, I don't know, put down a karma, I suppose. So because I'm a family friend, I help out by taking cigarettes to her. So literally, I know. So I go all the way over and I just literally take her a packet of cigarettes as a gift, because I'm her friend. And it can be a real, how to put this politely, it can be a real, it's a very good way to practice patience, put it that way, without blowing my top, and vice versa. But yeah, it's very good because it's very good practice, and it's very appreciated both ways because it helps me to practice as well. To give of myself. So I appreciate it.
Oh, that's
myself
wonderful.
as well. But at the same time, I also learned that through that, I have to pace myself as well. It's very easy to get burnt out. Because I found that in myself, because my friend, the first one, he has a reoccurring cycle of doing the same thing. He basically doesn't really understand or don't want to understand that he gets into a cycle where he gets stuck. And so he expects everybody to help him out. And that can be very, very tiring for everybody else to deal with. So that's the problem with that. So we have to be very skillful with him. And this is a guy like in his 80s and he's almost like a child. In some instances. But it's so it's very good practice.
Wonderful.
Both ways.
Great, that's wonderful. I love the way you're speaking about it as having benefits of practice as the reward rather than any sort
it's very good.
Even good feeling you might get because you have to endure, isn't it?
Because it was done on because it's an act of giving. Basically. Good.
Wonderful.
Wisdom as well.
Thank you for sharing. That's
welcome. Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
May I ask Mukund, may I ask you to unmute, please?
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, it's so my mother is 80 and she is now deeply into dementia. She's or Alzheimer's, whatever. She's like, she will say something, do something, and literally 1 minute later would not know she's done it. So it's she's actually like in a senior home with my brothers, so not like put away in a care home. And I have, so he's in India, I'm in India as well, but in a different city. He's actually at a Goenka retreat right now, Venerable. He just gets back from Igatpuri tomorrow. Yeah, so I've been here for the last like 10, 12 days while he's been away. And I have a brother in the US, and actually my brothers are make me feel great, because my brother in the US will say, I'll come and stay for a month if required. He actually did a month's retreat last year. So he was here for a full month, and I came for a little bit in between. And of course, she's staying with my brother. But it's very difficult. It's also very interesting. Like, I was a bit surprised that we actually have my uncles, her brothers, basically saying, she should be put in a care home, which essentially means that we need family with her, which is, both my brothers and I are extremely uncomfortable with that. But at the same time, it is super difficult. I mean, like this last 10 days I've been here, I'm working as well. And it's almost impossible to work with the door open, because, she'll just walk in every few minutes with the same thing, whatever. And I feel very bad about locking the door. So it's a difficult thing, and I think it's it goes beyond what should I say, general metta and general patience. This is really about, I guess at some levels I'm saying I need to know my limits. I need to know when I need to lock the door, because I'm not going to be able to handle the situation well. And of course, and other times knowing when to be patient. There was a time when I used to worry about, I'm not really answering that question truthfully. And now I'm like, that's okay. I have to answer based on what she can understand. And she can't understand anything that's more than a one sentence answer. So any complicated question will not get an accurate answer.
Right.
So she will constantly ask me, can I come back to Delhi with you? And I always tell her yes, knowing that it's never going to happen, but she just can't do it.
Yeah.
So it's complicated.
Yeah. It's almost like the intention overrides the words, right? Like the intention of compassion and, putting a person's mind at ease is more important at that moment than literal truth, because that's not what she's understanding anyway. So in that sense, it's not exactly a lie, I would say. I mean, there's very few cases where it's encouraged or, it's not going to create some kind of inner conflict. But I think in that case, it's quite wise to put the general kind of patient's well-being first, so that's really skillful. And I mean, it is probably a little bit encouraging to notice that in this sutta, it does also talk about the qualities that make a patient easy to care for, right? So it's not actually saying encouraging you necessarily. It's recognizing that it's helpful if the patient's easy to care for, that it works both ways, So who knows what the Buddha would say in that situation? I think he would definitely encourage that you do take the time to practice meditation to re-resource yourself, and to develop that self-compassion and acknowledgement of your limitations, how far you can really help.
Your point about being compassionate to the person versus necessarily being absolutely honest, I think is really resonates, right? Because I mean, telling her no, you can't come with me, or you can never come with me, is true and not helpful, and it doesn't matter what I say, because she's going to forget in a few minutes and repeat afterwards anyway. And in a way, you're answering to someone who's not in the reality anyway, right? She's in her own reality. So in a way, it's a kind of theoretical conversation, isn't it? It's a kind of playing along with a little bit of fantasy in a way. Yeah. And I actually did notice this point about the patient's responsibilities, because sometimes I feel like telling her, look, it'd be helpful if you're a little patient and you don't get angry, and like there's a helper around as well. Sometimes I'm like, you really should be a little bit more kind to her, because just because something is placed 1 foot away from where it should be, is not a reason to get upset. So yeah.
Right. Right. Wow, well done though. I think you deserve a lot of credit.
Well, my brother is doing most of it. I'm just filling in at times.
Yeah. But you are developing enormous qualities with that, because it's difficult. And the more difficult a situation, the more scope for developing ourselves there can be, as long as we know when, the limit really of our capacity and have that to ourselves. I'm going to try and move on a little bit. I'm not sure if anyone else has a question before we come back to Susie, just to give everyone a chance. So anyone else? Otherwise, I'll come to Susie. Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to add, it's so brave how everyone's coming out with like so many like tough stories. It's very reflective of how samsara is quite a difficult place. Because I didn't meet many people who struggle with so many difficult things, and we didn't talk about it. It's like a thing that's sort of like a stigma to talk about, and you're also brave to talk about like stuff like schizophrenia and dementia. It's like it's all part of our lives.
Right.
So those people who care for people, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, that's kind.
Especially loving kindness. That is a big part of it, because loving kindness is such a positive influence on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Linda.
Hi, I'll just speak briefly. I'll lower my hand. I'll just speak briefly. I hear about limitations and about difficult patients. I worked as a carer, and I found my difficulties, my lack of patience, my fear would be with people with aggressive dementia and aggressive intellectual disabilities. And I enjoyed working with I enjoyed working with people who were palliative, end of life.
Right. Yeah. And that's fair enough. We're not all cut out for the same things, I mean, I think we need credit when we even try. I mean, how many people, would even consider caring as a livelihood? You can make more money in a simpler job that doesn't involve so much of a challenge to oneself. So I think it's really laudable and really beautiful when people make that choice. It doesn't matter how long we do it for, it's just the fact that we tried. So I think that's, and sometimes we have to find our strengths, because, part of this sutta is about putting your efforts where it's going to yield the most fruit, right? Where the patient is responsive, they do take their medicine, etc., right? You could apply that to sort of being able, really being amenable to the help. And maybe sometimes it's better to put our energies where we know we can have a direct benefit, and there might be other people that are more qualified to work with others, So, I mean, I certainly see my life that way, that I try to put my energies into things where I know that it can have a lot of impact, even though it's difficult. And sometimes I need to take time out for myself. And sometimes the conditions aren't there to make something come about, say a Bhikkhuni monastery or starting to train other nuns. I'd love to do that straight away, but, as long as there aren't enough conditions, there isn't enough support or help with admin or other Bhikkhunis to sort of, bring more balance to the training, and then the conditions aren't there. So the best thing I can do sometimes is go on retreat, develop myself in Dhamma, and trust that, when there's enough support, then we can move it forward. So yeah, I think that's perfectly okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to carry on. Are there any more comments or questions on this particular sutta first of all, or shall we get on to the next one, which moves into quite a different area? Shall we continue? All right, I'll come to the question in the box later on. So the next one is from the Anguttara 8, called Caste is Irrelevant. Isn't that nice? We could extend that to gender is irrelevant, all kinds of things. I mean, they're not irrelevant so long as they impact our lives, but I think the point here is that the Buddha is speaking of inclusivity. So, merging like the rivers in the ocean is the first subsection. Just as when the great rivers, the Ganges, the Yamuna, the Achiravati, the Sarabhu and the Mahi reach the great ocean, they give up their former names and designations and are simply called the great ocean. So too, when members of the 4 castes, Kshatriyas, Brahmins, Vaisas, and Sudras, go forth from the household life into homelessness in the Dhamma and discipline, proclaimed by the Tathagata, that's the Buddha, they give up their former names and clans and are simply called ascetics following the Sakyan son. So, that's quite lovely, isn't it? That we give up that kind of designation that differentiates ourselves, especially in terms of ranking one greater than another or above another. And in this case, I mean, the castes weren't necessarily always seen as one being superior to the other, but just the fact that there are these different worldly kind of livelihoods or roles that we play. Once we come to the Buddha's dispensation and actually renounce our hair, our clothing, our status, and all of that, it really makes no sense to continue to refer to ourselves that way. I have to admit, I find it strange, and this is nothing against any individual, and there might be reasons for this, but I do find it strange when some monastics use the word Dr. Venerable such and such, you know, as if the fact that they're a doctor in something is still important, because actually at that point, you're just a member of the Sangha, right? You're not practicing as a doctor. It doesn't really matter how much you've learned. It's all about the qualities you develop in your heart. It's about surrendering yourself to the training. And actually, yeah, coming out of that identity view. So I really like that, and simply called ascetics, following the Sakyan son. I mean, that was the Buddha, he was a Sakyan, which is kind of ironic actually to me that it says that here where it's saying we give up our clan. But anyway, I prefer to think of him as just the Buddha, but I guess they're just referring to him here. But I like the idea that we're simply called ascetics, rather than, actually even monastics. But I never like to refer to myself very much as a bhikkhuni, or as having become a bhikkhuni, or people wanting to become monks and nuns, because we're not actually trying to become anything. We're actually giving up a lot. And we might be taking a particular ordination, a particular system of training, but that doesn't make us any different as human beings to anyone else. We're just willingly surrendering ourselves in a way, or making ourselves amenable to the training. So I think it's so important not to think of monastic life as an escape either. And, oh, I don't like being a lay person. I want to be a nun. I want to be, maybe an ajahn, or all these different titles that we can start to bring into monastic life. But just to consider ourselves as ascetics, people who've given up our status, our wealth, and all those things that kind of define us in the world. Because we carry enough of that internally, right? The last thing we want to do is carry it with names and labels as well. And I really like the bit about merging into the great ocean. We just come together. And I think that's one of the things when you are in a Buddhist country or a big monastery. Everybody looks the same. So when you go for alms round, you just come together wearing the same clothes, maybe different colors, different genders, if you're lucky to be in a dual sangha, or if a monastery sometimes welcomes monks or nuns. So they're both together there. it's really beautiful, because you don't really know kind of who's great at meditation or who's a sutta expert. You're basically just in order of who went forth first. So you're respecting the commitment, you're respecting the years of training that somebody has, not any individual. So someone's saying, this makes me think of the teachings on the 3 conceits, which seem to be a very deep teaching, since it was how some monastics declared arahatship to the Buddha. Yeah. So there's 3 conceits, that I am better, I am worse, and even I am the same, or I am equal. And these are very refined forms of conceit that basically people have right until they're fully enlightened. Even the anagami, I think, can have that mana. It's called asmi mana, like the conceit of I am anything, right? So still that idea that there's something even equal is a kind of conceit, because the point is that there's actually nothing there that you can really put any label on. It's the process. How can a process be equal to another process, or the same or different? I mean, it's just a process. It's cause and effect. So yeah, sometimes the monastics would go to the Buddha and basically say that they didn't think, they never kind of conceive that I am better, I'm worse, I'm the same. They don't conceive that way anymore. And then the Buddha would know that they'd put down all identity view, even in thought and perception, not only the view, but the whole way of conceiving. So yeah, that's true. And obviously this is the very beginning, isn't it? When we still differentiate ourselves in terms of things like caste or class or educational background, etc. Not to say that sometimes in monasteries there aren't differences, or there aren't people with certain strengths that we can actually kind of, what do you say, sort of hone or utilize for the sake of furthering the Dhamma, right? Some people will be good at one thing, some at another. But it doesn't mean the person who just sweeps the monastery is any less worthy of respect than the person who, you know, leads the sutta class. And sometimes we can trade places as well. So that's really important in monastic life, that we all have a go at a bit of everything. Yeah, I always like it when I have the chance to do a bit of washing up, or I don't know, make some tea with some herbs or something, because I'm not allowed to cook, but I can still make a nice lemon and ginger, whatever, water on the stove, and it's great. I love that, you know. It's sometimes weird being a monastic when you're not allowed to do anything for yourself, because yeah, sometimes you feel that some of these really senior kind of, usually monks, because there aren't so many senior bhikkhunis, but usually monks in some cultures, some traditions, become almost like royalty, you know. And it's dangerous. It's actually dangerous if you think, now I am a such and such, a Ajahn, or whatever, most venerable Maha Ajahn that ever existed. So yeah, we have to be careful of that. Did Mukund have something again?
Mukund.
No. I wonder if anyone in the room has something to offer or add about anything so far. Do you want to say anything, Venerable Upekkhā? I'm sure you have lots of things to add, and people would love to hear from you.
Well, the one about
If you speak louder.
Well,
Hang on. Where's your... Ah, there she is. Hang on. There you are. All right. There you are. Okay.
well, I was thinking about.
Can you hear?
About the being a patient and being looking after a sick person, and I remember an analogy Ajahn Sucitto made in a talk that I was, well, actually a book I was reading. But you know, when we treat ourselves, when we treat our own little minds, we it's like we treat ourselves like a patient, as opposed to how we usually treat ourselves, which is just telling ourselves to do this and to do that. But you know, when you look after a patient, you see, are they okay? You know, they're feeling grumpy today. What can I do? Can I fix the bed? Oh dear, you know, do they need anything? Do they need any medicine? And to treat our ourselves, our minds, like we treat a patient that is sick, because actually we are sick. But yeah, but to have that attitude of looking after a patient when we are sitting down to meditate, really, when we look at ourselves. Yes. Yeah. I find that very useful. Yes.
I've got to, thank you. That's really great. Yeah. Yeah, so we were saying earlier, you know, with a patient, if you could see your mind as a patient, you wouldn't say, right, mind, come on, get up. Don't do that. Turn over, take your medicine. We wouldn't do that, would we? I mean, I hope we wouldn't, because we get fired from our job as a carer, that's for sure. So, you know, but we do it with our mind. We're like, come on, get up. You're meant to meditate. You only meditated half an hour. Oh, my goodness. Take your medicine. Watch your breath, you know. So, yeah. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Venerable Upekkhā. Okay. And someone else says, in Chinese, we call all monastics ones who've left home, which sounds beautiful to me too. Yeah, ones who've left home. That's lovely. And what does bhikkhu and bhikkhuni mean? It does mean that, right? It means like, does it mean alms mendicant? Yeah.
It means a beggar.
It means a beggar. Right. Yeah, I mean, one who have left home. In Theravada, we call anagarikas. That's like a homeless one, or one who's left the home, because there's a difference being homeless and being an anagarika. Some people are homeless, they don't have a choice, they don't have a roof, right? That's what we think of as homeless in our society. So anagarikas still usually, hopefully, have a roof. And in ancient Indian culture, if they didn't, then they'd be probably quite lucky to be offered one anyway in a village of some supporter. So yeah. Someone else is saying even the Buddha had the physician, Jivaka, absolutely. And even the Buddha, well, of course, the Buddha, because sometimes we think that if we're enlightened, we're not going to get sick. Or sometimes people say, you know, I hope your meditation practice improves to the point where you'll get better. And honestly, I mean, that helps the mind, but it isn't going to necessarily help conditions that are caused by something external. So just harking back to my Ayurvedic training, we had two types of conditions. Some were kind of internal, which were produced by the humours of the body. Actually, it's not humours really, it's the functions of the body internally, say the elements, kind of an imbalance in the elements. But some are called agantuja, which means they come from outside. And that's things like parasites, bacteria, whatever. This is nothing to do with our mental state, right? Unless you could say it's caused by ignorance, delusion, taking the wrong food, drinking the wrong water. It could sometimes be a little bit of miscalculation, but basically, like, these things are physical issues that need a physical cause. And of course, you know, depending on the state of mind, we'll suffer more or less. We can do a whole load of, we can improve things a lot by our attitude. But if you already have a really positive attitude, it's not necessarily it's not enough to actually cure disease. If that were the case, the Buddha wouldn't have died. And they also say, you know, Ajahn Brahm always says, that's his excuse. Oh, well, if ginseng worked, all the Chinese people all die. So ginseng's not the miracle drug, you know. So yeah, we have to be realistic. I mean, that's what led the Buddha to renounce the world, isn't it? And to wander forth as a homeless one. He saw the old person, maybe male, the sick person, the dead person, and then the ascetic. So it was like, I don't know, I love that order. You see the dead person, and then you see, oh, there's an ascetic. Maybe they're seeking the way out of birth and death. And that was actually one of the definitions of dukkha. It's birth, aging, and death. It's pretty radical, pretty simple, so you can overlook it, but it's pretty radical because these are the things we cannot avoid, right? Once you've got your birth and you're living your happy life, you can make it pretty nice for a while. You can have the like exemplary life, or you can have the kind of very comfortable, very meaningful life, but still you're not going to escape that sickness and death. So yeah, the Buddha did have a physician, and I think he was also Ayurvedic. Ayurvedic doesn't mean some kind of hocus pocus, it just means the science of life. So finding a medical system that's really looking at causes, causality. Yeah. So bhiksha is what you beg for in Sanskrit. Interesting. Even in Hindi today, the word for to beg is bhik. B-H-E-E-K. B-E-K, so like eat. Yeah, wow. Is what you beg for, bhiksha. Like you actually get bhiksha, or you are a bhiksha. I'm not sure. Today the word for to beg is beek. Very interesting. Yeah, I'll just check in with you.
Yeah, so in Sanskrit, you know, like I guess the Brahmanical equivalent of I guess an officer, you know, is you're supposed to go through a period of training when you go away to the forest. You know, it's one of the stages of life. So when you beg, you say, you know, if it's a lady, you say Bhavati Bhiksham Dehi, and Bhiksham or Bhiksha is what you're begging for. So you know,
Right.
you're begging for food. So,
Okay.
so there's a connection between Bhiksha and Bhikkhu.
Very
There's a slight difference between Sanskrit and Pali in terms of how these words are pronounced.
Right. So it certainly wasn't a status thing, right? Because a beggar is like the lowest of the low in most cultures. Someone who begs is like not somebody.
But there's a lot of respect for the Samaneras in general, right? So
absolutely.
So in that sense, it is not derogatory at all.
It's not derogatory, absolutely, but it's respect because they actually have gone forth and given something up, rather than respect because they've become something, or because they, you know, they have a status. Yeah, and it's only really respected, I think, in those cultures which have that understanding. I mean, over here, it's, you know, as a Western monastic, you're usually kind of, at least people's families at first think, well, what have they done? They've given up a really good degree and a possible career, and that's embarrassing, you know, to tell their friends about that. It's like she's just like loafing around and, you know, asking for things from people. And actually, my parents never thought too much like that, but I know people who do have parents who it's very challenging for. Yeah, very challenging in Western non-Buddhist countries. Yeah. But I receive respect in India as well. I have been there actually as a nun, not as a as a Bhikkhuni too, but even as a Burmese nun, people would come up to me in the street and just suddenly say, "Can we offer you lunch?" It was fantastic. I was quite impressed because they didn't really care if I was a Buddhist or what I was. They just saw the robe and they were like, "Oh, Mahatma Ji," or like Sadhu Ji or something. It was really sweet. Yeah. Renunciation's respected in India, actually, regardless of religion, I would say. It's a fantastic culture, so vibrant and rich. All right. So anything else on that point about the caste and the coming together of many people in harmony? Anything else we can learn from that in our societies? Anything, going, and we go on. So, the next one's also quite short. And this also comes under the caste subject. So, all can realize the highest goal. So that's what's really important. Suppose there were a pond with clear, agreeable, cool water, transparent, with smooth banks, delightful. If a person scorched and exhausted by hot weather, weary, parched, and thirsty, came from the east or from the west, or from the north or from the south, or from where you will, having reached the pond, they would quench their thirst and their hot weather fever. So too, if anyone from a clan of Kshatriyas goes forth from the home life into homelessness, or from a clan of Brahmins, or a clan of Vaisas, or a clan of Suttas, and after encountering the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, they develop loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity, and thereby gain internal peace, then because of that internal peace, they practice the way proper to the ascetic, I say. Monastics, if anyone from a clan of Kshatriyas goes forth from the home life into homelessness, or from a clan of Brahmins, or a clan of Vaisas, or a clan of Suttas, and by realizing it for themselves with direct knowledge that they here and now enter upon and abide in the liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom that is influx free through the destruction of the influxes, that's the asaras, then they're an ascetic because of the destruction of the influxes. And that's from Majjhima Nikaya 40, which I'm not sure of the name of that sutta. If anybody has the name, that'd be interesting. And the page for Diana is now page 121 to 122. Yeah, you have it written there. Great. Yeah. So this is what makes you truly an ascetic. Not just the robe, not just the begging, not just the going forth and leaving the household life. So, but it's step by step, isn't it? It's the gradual training again, which is one of the main themes in the suttas from start to finish. There's a gradual training, and we do each step according to our capacity at that time and according to how it may further our practice. So it's not for everybody to ordain, to renounce the world and to go forth, but all the same, everybody, when they encounter the Dhamma and the discipline, they can practice from any clan, from any kind of, I would say, you can extend that to anything, right? Any human being with their faculties intact who are capable of hearing the Dhamma and understanding the Dhamma have the opportunity when they hear that Dhamma to develop these things, and they are the proper ascetics. Of course, here it is talking about ascetics in the sense of renunciates, but you can still be, you can still basically be a saint, right? If you want to use Christian language. Even as a householder, there's hope for you all. I didn't really mean it that way, but yeah, just that it's incredibly inclusive. So yeah, this is really beautiful, encouraging teaching, isn't it? Yeah. So we have to encounter the Dhamma and the Vinaya. Here it's an extension of the Dhamma. Sometimes actually I read something really nice recently that explained the importance of the Vinaya more clearly to me, because sometimes it has come to mean discipline. But actually in the beginning, the word Vinaya actually meant the application of the Dhamma. It wasn't limited just to the rules of the Patimokkha or the training rules. It was actually the application of Dhamma. So that's why Dhamma Vinaya, actually, people say Vinaya is Vinaya. The Dhamma in Vinaya is kind of like the Dhamma in its application, the Dhamma in its practice, which I think is much broader and more beautiful. So we have to encounter it, we have to actually practice it, and then develop these things, developing loving kindness, compassion, mudita, altruistic joy, and equanimity. Then they're practicing properly. So that's a bona fide path, right? And I like how it's stated this way, that first it's the practice of the Brahma Viharas, and then we take it even further. By realizing with direct knowledge, we enter upon liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom. Yeah, and we actually remove these asaras, which are basically, you could call them influxes, you could also call them outflowings, Ajahn Brahm's preferred translation. Basically the things that come in and stain or pollute the mind, the defilements really of greed, hate, and delusion. And then because of that, we're a true ascetic. So it's gradual again. But I'd like to think that this sort of shows a possible path through those developments of the Brahma Viharas, because they are also equivalent to the 4 jhanas and overcome many of the defilements of the mind. Loving kindness, of course, specifically for ill will, and then compassion is a very beautiful way to overcome, I think, judgment. Judgment of others. Instead of judging, we have compassion, understanding that, just as they suffer, we also might be suffering at any particular time. It's dependently arisen. If we were in their situation, we too might behave that way or might suffer that way. And then the altruistic joy, which is a way to remove resentment, to remove jealousy, that stinginess of mind. And of course, the equanimity, which is able to be at peace with the world and with our life and experience and others, of course, the way it is, understanding that we're all subject to the laws of karma, cause and effect again, and we can help others. We can have this loving kindness, we can have the compassion and rejoice in people's success, but ultimately we can't change things for others. You know, they will actually meet the results of their own karma. So we can create, if you like, a really loving container which maybe supports them in their life. But yeah, anyway, that's at the societal level, but obviously at a deeper level in the mind, we can develop these as deep states of samadhi. And that samadhi makes the mind clear enough to start to see the truth and to see with wisdom into where we suffer and how we can be freed. So that's really lovely, isn't it? That's the whole purpose of the holy life. And we always say at the ordination, you know, may you give me the going forth for the sake of the realization of Nibbana, not for the sake of any kind of accolade or reward or respect. You know, that may come in due course, but, you know, a person that's really humble and that's really developed will never let that go to the head. Sajjan Brahm always says it's kind of ironic. There seems to be some kind of safeguard in the Dhamma, safeguard mechanism, whereby the more you disappear, the more respect you get. So it doesn't actually impact you negatively, because sometimes the praise can really corrupt a person's mind. But actually, if it's praise given for depth in meditation and for wisdom, it doesn't, because there's less of you there to receive the praise. So anyway, I've spoken a lot, and it would be really nice to have some more interaction just before we finish today. There's still 10 minutes or so to have some discussion around this. So please do contribute any thoughts or... Yes, Ted.
Yeah. Can you unmute, please?
Thank you, Aya. And yeah, I still have this sort of lingering question about something about being a patient, because I've been ill for about 30 years, and it gets a little annoying being in that role after a while. Like, I went from being a young person, young, vibrant hiking person to a patient, and so it gets very tiresome. And I think I find, like, I think Venerable Upekkhā said something about what was talking about, what was it? Sorry, I lose track sometimes.
That's okay. Was this today about the patient and treating our minds the way we treat a patient?
Yeah. And I was like, well, yeah, and I am the patient, you know?
Right.
And so, and I find myself being reluctant a lot. And I don't know that I'm a very good patient. And I think that I sort of fall into not doing anything about, no, I can't say that. That's not true. I do a lot.
Yeah.
So I want to backtrack on that. I do a lot, but there are things that I know are important that I just sort of fail at sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll fail for long periods of time. Like, I was forgetting to take my supplements. And actually hearing Venerable say that, I was like, I'm getting my pill box out and I'm going to take them right now here. So, you know, but I just wonder, like, about how to manage that. Like, is there a way that you would suggest?
Well, I think the first way, thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry to hear that you've been suffering for so long with this. And I think, my goodness, if that's been going on, 20 years, did you say 30 years? 30 years. I mean, that would test anybody's patience. It's really different. It's really difficult. I mean, I don't have your experience quite, but I do have it to some degree. It's about 18 years for me since my energy levels dropped significantly with chronic gastric condition. And it's difficult because you know how you used to be, and you know that your energy is far lower now, and you just kind of somehow normalize it somehow, but it's never the same as the people around you, and that's really difficult because there will be some grief around that. But I think in some ways you sort of pointed to one answer, And also, just to draw again on the simile that Venerable Upekkhā shared, I think the point there is being a patient to your mind, being patient, treating the mind like you would treat a patient. So it's not beating yourself up when you don't take your medicine, you know, it's not beating yourself up when you get impatient or resentful or you grieve about your situation. It's, you know, you wouldn't do that with another patient. You wouldn't say, well, come on, cheer up, for goodness sake, what's wrong with you? You know, you should be happy all the time. You wouldn't say that. You'd say, gosh, it must be hard for you. You know, I can't imagine what you're going through, but, you know, just relax. You're doing really well. You know, you took your medicine a few months ago. I'm sure you can start taking it again today. So that's one thing I think is, you know, to care for your mind, care for the reactions that you have. That might be a little bit too hard and demanding on yourself. Because I really think the patience involved in bearing with a chronic condition is immense already. And the results will pay, you know, you'll see the results as the aging process really starts to kick in, because other people have often the conceit of youth, the conceit of health. You know, the Buddha talked about these two as conceits. We don't really realize how fortunate we are to be healthy. We think, well, that's just me, you know. Sick people, maybe there's something wrong with their attitude or whatever. So we have this conceit, but you don't have that. So this is already going to help enormously when it comes to later on in the life. But the other thing I think was that you probably do a lot that's really positive. And the mind has a tendency to notice when we don't do something right. So what about all those things you do every day that are actually good for you? You know, maybe preparing a good meal or taking the rest that you need, or just acknowledging your limitations, your energy levels, etc. The times that you did take medicine, because you weren't taking it anyway. So when you get it, then yes, I took it today, you know. But we always tend to notice when we don't do things right, and we're too hard on ourselves. So yeah, maybe using that patient analogy to think, well, would I really blame another person? Because we're far harder on ourselves. Especially it's hard when we're the ones looking after ourselves all the time. That's like, oh, you just want someone else to do it sometimes and remind you and put your medicine in front of you, you know. So, you know, you're doing pretty well, I think. So try and see the positives, what you do rather than what you don't. That's one way. Yeah. And a lot of self-compassion as well. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So anything else from the group? From anyone who hasn't spoken or shared or would like to contribute? Nothing? Okay. So someone else is asking about medical requirements for becoming a bhikkhuni or for taking bhikkhuni ordination. I have a difficult medical history and I'm anxious about wanting to ordain. Well, firstly, I would say that there is no such thing as just ordaining as a bhikkhuni, because it's a huge training and it takes a long time. It's a process. It involves coming to stay in a monastery, getting to know the community, getting to know what monastic life's about. This can take already a long time. And then one would begin as an anagarika, which is 8 precepts, which hopefully you're able to do. I mean, if somebody has a chronic gastric condition from the start, it's a bit more tricky, because it's good to be able to start on the right foot and to be strong enough to undertake the initial training, but it's not absolutely essential. Other medical conditions, I mean, you get to know the community, you get to see where it may be difficult, and maybe monastic life wouldn't be that suitable, or it might worsen the condition, maybe it wouldn't. So you get to see that for yourself. And it also depends on the community, how mature the community is, how much support there is. You know, in the case of a new community, which is just beginning, it's very, very helpful if I would have people, it'd be essential, that have some stamina to serve and to be able to help the establishment of the monastery. Because, you know, I'm already overworked, I'm already not 100% well, and having other people to care for when, you know, medically, for example, when you're already overworked and struggling and not so well, is just not realistic. So it has to work for the whole community. But I would say, you know, there's a few communities now. There's a few Bhikkhuni communities, and it's never just a decision based on one aspect of what you bring. You know, you may have strengths in other ways. There may be communities that can support you really well. There may be others where it's difficult. So I would begin the exploration. Don't rule anything out. But yeah, just be open-minded and realistic that it may be a path for you, but you know, if it's not, that's fine as well. I think everybody that even starts the exploration takes a few steps further. This is my feeling to liberation, because you're actually really challenging this underlying most strong defilement, if you like. I don't like the word defilement, but strongest tendency of wanting in the mind. Renouncing is going directly against that, and it's hugely beneficial in the practice. It's essential, actually. But there's many ways to do that, not only by ordaining. There are many ways to do that. So see it as a process, and see every step on that process, even just the initial exploration, as hopefully benefiting your practice. So, I mean, for myself, and I don't necessarily say this is a good thing, but it was a situational thing. It took me 10 years to find a place to ordain. And that was knowing that that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life, having already been meditating very sincerely and fairly intensively and giving a lot of service over 10 years. And I don't regret any moment of that, because it was all really, really strong preparation for what was to come. So, yeah. So, yeah, don't be too fixated on the goal, but just go through the process and see how you grow. Okay. So last comment here. Thanks for sharing that. This is the person who shared about their health condition. That's amazing, having lived with something for 30 years, feeling much better for you. You obviously have great intentions and are trying. Just being at a Sutta class proves that. I think you should copy and paste that comment. Ajahn Brahm always tells me, you know, if you get some encouragement or someone expresses gratitude, copy, paste it, keep it somewhere. Because we don't see how strong we are. We don't see what we give to others and how we inspire. So, wow, so beautiful, isn't it? That by sharing our struggles, we really inspire others as well. Yeah. And someone else is backing that too, including me, and I'm sure everyone else here too. So thank you so much. I think we're almost coming to a close, and I think normally one of our co-host team say a few words on dana to end. So if you can just stick about for another few minutes, and then we'll let you know what's happening with the next teachings. Okay?
Yeah, so as you know, today's Sutta discussion is offered on a donation basis in the spirit of generosity. So that is what the dana is about. Any contribution you're able to make is gratefully received, and it will help to improve our new vihara in Oxford and day-to-day running of it, and development of England's first monastery where women can train towards full Bhikkhuni ordination. As Venerable told now, there's aspired Bhikkhunis in the future maybe coming and checking, and you know, how this life is, and is it for me? And there's a lot of things that a vihara like this gives, and also teachings for people like us all here. So if you are able to donate, we will put a link in the chat box. And if you are capable, you can provide a food dana to Venerables by visiting the vihara. And you can contact team at anukampaproject.org for more details. And they will send you a calendar with, there is a calendar in the website as well, for dana needing days. And also there are several more ways to get involved by getting into a couple of WhatsApp groups to provide food when there's no bookings made, or if you want to volunteer, if you have any expertise, any one-off work in vihara, or weekly supermarket delivery. There are several ways of doing that. And if you have any strengths and if you feel like you can do some volunteering, you have some quality time to give as dana, that also is very much appreciated. So contact team at anukampa.org if you can go one step more in this community. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. I brought everybody who's in the room here to say goodbye because they're just the sweetest people you ever can meet. Anyway, Venerable Upekkhā is very much here and will be with you for the next couple of weeks while I'm away in Norway teaching for Den Norsk Buddhist for something. I can't read the rest of it, but basically the Norwegian Buddhist Association is a very great name for the first monastery or foundation in Norway to develop a monastery that supports Bhikkhunis as well. So I'll be teaching there and seeing some of you. I know Erica's coming. Unfortunately, Ellen can't come, but anyway, some of you can. And yeah, this is Paul and Richard, our wonderful hosts. They're actually giving us this house, which is their house to live in, while they go and stay in an Airbnb. It's like amazingly generous. So me and Venerable Upekkhā can have like this holiday in, honestly, the most idyllic, one of the most idyllic parts of the country in Lancashire. So we're really appreciating it. And yeah, they've been serving us so beautifully. And it just gives me the feeling of like what this is about, you know, because it's not about any one bhikkhuni or even only bhikkhunis, right? It's about the whole community. And yeah, I'm so proud in the sense I didn't do it, but pleased and grateful that this is such an inclusive place. So yeah. And Paul, I don't know if you know, everybody knows Paul, but he's like our Facebook coordinator. And he's like one of our most devoted volunteers since the very, very beginning, like 2016, and has done just such incredible selfless service to bring in so many people into the Dhamma. Also many donations through Facebook and, you know, just a huge amount without ever, I don't know, just so humbly and so selflessly, you know. Anyway, I want to say that actually, because he probably doesn't really get that sort of, yeah, appreciation in public. And I think we all owe him a great deal. So yeah, anyway, all of you here have been supporting in so many ways. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Yeah, every session will carry on as usual, I think. Yeah, Venerable Upekkhā will do the chanting on a Wednesday. There'll be the weekly meditations with Matthias. And yeah, and for those who don't know, Ajahn Brahmali's here in May. You need to book because at this point, it's not long to go. Tell your friends. There's one talk with both of me and Venerable Upekkhā and Ajahn Brahmali, and we don't have many people coming, which is depressing. So please come so that we don't have to feel depressed. That's not fair, is it? Because it's up to us to handle it. But I'm sure it'll be really interesting. It's about gender in Buddhism, and you know, it's interesting to hear from people who aren't in the privileged section, or not such a privileged section anyways. Yeah, the talks are probably not all live streamed. It's a bit of a job, you know, for us to find more volunteers to do this, and then I have to say to my volunteers, you can't come to the talk, you got to live stream. It's a little bit too much. I'm organizing this mostly on my own at the moment, so I'm not sure. I think on the 23rd there's a day retreat by London Insight, and they'll be recording that live. But we record everything on video. You can wait a week or whatever, and the miraculous Matthias will put it on YouTube. Or Paul, here he is again. Paul and Matthias are our dream team who upload stuff to YouTube in no time at all. So everything is freely shared. I understand that Diana can't come all the way from California, so fair enough, you're off the hook. And the other thing to share is that Venerable Upekkhā and I will teach a little day retreat in Cambridge on June the 17th. So that's coming up in a newsletter in the next few weeks. All right. So I think you're very patient to stay this long, and we see you very soon. Take care, everybody. We can unmute you if you want. You can wave goodbye. We wave goodbye. We all wave goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, Venerable.